What I want to see today is something that we, we we all know the story. It's a great story, and what the beauty of Bereshis is the narratives. There's so many beautiful narratives, but sometimes we have to really understand those narratives, and sometimes we get caught up in the story and we don't go into the detail. And perhaps it's in the detail that we're able to see some amazing new lessons that we can learn. So what I want to look at is we know what happens. Avraham Avinu is promised by HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he will have children. We spoke about it yesterday. His children will be the stars of the sky, and we understood what that means, not in terms of the kamut, not in terms of the quantity, but in terms of the quality. But having said that, we're still in a situation in the fact that Avraham Avinu doesn't have any of his children of his own. And so therefore the Torah tells at the beginning of Perek Tet Zayin, V'Sarai Eshet Avram lo yaldalu, that Sarai, the wife of Avram, had not given him any children. And she has a shivcha, she has a maid servant, who's an Egyptian maid servant. And why does it tell us she's an Egyptian maid servant? So the Midrash tells us, where did she come from? She came from their little sojourn in Mitzrayim, where she wanted to connect into the space of Abraham and Sarah. And she was actually a princess of Mitzrayim, this woman Hagar. And she then connected to them, and she was prepared to give up on her status to connect into the monotheistic space of Abraham and Sarah. So Hagar comes along, she's this Egyptian maidservant, Vatome Sarai al Avram, and Sarah says to Avram, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not allowing me to give birth. Bona el shivchasi, please have relations, bona, I mean, that's what it says, have relations with my shivcha, ulai ibane mimena, maybe I'll build from her. Yishma Avram called Sarai, and Avram listened to the voice of Sarah, which means that initially he was against that. He was against trying to build through her legacy through another woman. But okay, he listens to her and he does what she has. What's interesting is that she constantly refers to her as Shivchati, and that's important. Vatikach Sarai eshet Avram et Hagara mitzvah Shivchata, and Sarai, the wife of Avram, takes Hagar the Mitzvah, who is her Shivcha, Miketz Eser Shanim, after 10 years. Hashem Avram Beretz Canaan, after they've been in Eretz Canaan for 10 years. Vatiten Otala Avram, Isha lo leisha. She gave this Shivcha to Avraham, her husband, as a wife. Lo leisha. So, we have to try and understand, what does this mean? That she gave him as a wife. So the Mefarshim explain that she gave him to as a wife. There was no ketubah, and there's no ketubah. So whilst it's a kind of a marriage, it's more of a concubine than a wife. Okay, leave that for the moment. So they come together, vatar, and she becomes pregnant. Vateira kiharata, and she saw that she had become pregnant. Vatekel gevirta be'ena, and all of a sudden, Tekel lessened, that her gevirta, her mistress, becomes lessened in her eyes. So she says, so Rashi tells us, what does it mean? She said, regarding Sarah, Sarazu ein sitra gigluya. He says, the truth is Sarah, what she reveals of herself and what she really is are completely different. In other words, she's not living in integrity with herself. She's speaking about Sarah. This is Hagar. Why? Because she presents herself like she's such a great tzaddikus. There's no way she could be a tzaddikus. There's no way she could be such a righteous woman. Why? And this is such an interesting way that she's thinking. She never deserved, or she never was zoiche, she never merited to become pregnant all these years. And I became pregnant having been together with Avram once, for the first time. So you can see that all of a sudden she's saying that it's clear that Sarah is not such a great woman because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not rewarding her. And it's because of that she sees Sarah not as so great. Remember, she joined Abraham and Sarah's quest to bring Kodesh Baruch Hu to the world because she saw Sarah so great. Now, because she falls pregnant, she says, hold on a second, Sarah's not so great. Maybe it's just about Abraham. And if it's just about Abraham and Sarah's just like a schlepper along, so then she poo-poos it totally. Sarai, now she's not yet Sarah, she's Sarai still. It's difficult to remember that. But anyway, so she's Sarai el Avram. So Sarai now goes, she's still the wife of Avram. She's still the one that Avram is spending his life with, who's mapping out their destiny together. And they're sitting and they're talking. And Sarai says to Avram, Chamasi alecha. Chamasi alecha. My Hamas is upon you. You have to understand what that means. I gave my shifcha, my maidservant, to you, and look, she's fallen pregnant, and I've become as nothing in her eyes. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu should judge between us. So says Rashi. Let's just look at Rashi. Rashi's there just to start off the story. Rashi says, Chamasi alecha, Chamas aswili alecha ani matela onish. Says the Hamas, the wrong that has been done to me, I'm putting the punishment on you. Alecha ani matela onish. Why? What's the wrong that's been done to her? And Hamas, we see Hamas in other places. Hamas is what the Torah describes, that Vatimaleha Aretz Hamas, but Hamas is just wrongfulness. That's the way the Mefarshim want to explain it. She says, Palalta la Kadosh Baruch Hu mati li. When you davened to Hashem, when Hashem told you about all these plans that He has for you, you said to Him, mati li. What are you giving to me? I'm barren. I'm your wife, says Sarah. You only daven for yourself. You should have davened for both of us. But then I would have been remembered with you. It's not right what you did. You only davened for yourself. You were so selfish. This is Sarai talking to Avram. I mean, it's an amazing conversation this between a husband and wife. And not only that, I'll tell you what else is wrong. You hear, you see, you perceive the way Hagar is treating me, and you do not say a thing. You listen to what's going on, you don't say anything. Anochi, and then she carries on. Anochi, natati shivchasi. I gave it to her, and now look what's happened. So Rashi points out something amazing. He says, if you look in the words where she says, Yishpot Adonai beini ubeinecha, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should judge between me and you, that if you look at the word beinecha, it's spelled Bet Yud Nun Yud Chaf. And Rashi points out that whenever it uses the word beinecha, it always is Bet Yud Nun Chaf. There's no Yud between the Nun and the Chaf. In other words, it's what we call chaser. It's lacking. Here says Rashi, it's full. So what you could read it if you didn't know how to read it, then it would say Yishpot Hashem beini ubeinayich, between me and her. Why? So says Rashi, an amazing story. Shechnisa ayin hara beibura shel Hagar veipila ubura. That you know what? Sarah gave an ayin hara to Hagar, and that the first child that she fell pregnant with, remember, and she said that I fell pregnant the first time I was with Avram, that child, she had a miscarriage. The Malach says, we see that you're pregnant. She's already become pregnant. No. And why is he telling her she's going to become pregnant? That later on we'll see. Comes into the Torah to tell us that she had a miscarriage. Why did she have a miscarriage? It doesn't mean all miscarriages are because of this. It means she had a miscarriage because Sarah gave her an anhora. Sarah gave her an anhora because she gave an anhora, so therefore she miscarries and she doesn't have that child going all the way to the end. The Chizkuni tells us that a little bit more about what Sarah is telling us. That he says Chamasi. What is Chamasi? This is wrong. What is it that showed Sarah that Hagar no longer saw Sarah as a person of worth? she no longer was prepared to serve it. When Sarah gives, the way that Mepharshim explained, when Sarah gives Hagar to Abraham, she gives Hagar to Abraham as her shifcha. The whole point is that it's supposed to still be a part of her because it's her property. She owns her, and so she gives her to Abraham to have her child on her behalf. She's just a conduit for the child. She's just carrying it. I can't remember what the word is. She's carrying the child for her. That's all. It's not meant to belong to Hagar. And if that's the case, then Hagar should still be serving Sarah. But somehow there's a certain process that happens that Hagar and Abraham change that dynamic. That Hagar becomes sort of a real wife to Abraham, and in doing that, she removes herself from Sarah. And Sarah says that it's on you. My wrong is on you. Why? You are not looking after my honor. And I don't want to do anything to her because she is now with you. So now it's quite a catch-22 situation for Sarah. So comes along Sarah, and she says, Yishpot Hashem beni wa beinecha. Says Hashem has to judge between us. Why? Because I'm worried about your covered because you've got this woman who is now like your wife, and I don't want to say anything to her. But you, I'm your primary wife, and you don't worry about my honor. That's not okay. Finally, the Chizkuni says you have to look at the word ubeinecha. On the word beinecha, you'll see something fascinating, and on this we'll finish. On the word beinecha, there is a dot. Sometimes in the Torah, there are like little dots on top of some of the letters. It's very few and far between. But here there is a dot on top of that yud, that extra yud. The Chizkuni points out what this is all about, and he says the following, and this is really something lovely and something to learn and something to think about. He says the following: Shel Ezra HaSofer says, all the time you have these dots. The reason why there are those dots is because the way the word is written was a little bit of a suffix. Ezra wasn't sure how you should write that word. Should you write it, in this case, with the yud or without the yud? He's not sure. Amar, he said, Moshe Rabbeinu comes and he says to me, why did you write the words like this? I could say to him, I made a point. I made a little mark on him to say I wasn't sure. And if he says, why did you make that mark on top of them? I'll just erase the nakuda. What the Chizkuni is telling us is an amazing thing. We understand that word ubeinecha with the yud is taught us through the midrash, that it shows that Sarah gave her an ein hora. That's where we learn it from. What the Chizkuni is saying is that's great from a drush point of view, but is it the correct way to write the Torah? The Ezra, when he wrote that Torah and he restarted Torah for Am Yisrael, so he himself wasn't sure how best to write it, which, by the way, could mean that this whole concept of the ein hora is a midrashic understanding, and it's not necessarily I don't know, I can't say correct because that's not the right word, but it's not necessarily the way we should be understanding it. And that's why all these midrashic stories become problematic. But either way, what the Chizkuni is telling us is that those little dots are indicative of the fact that sometimes we make droshes out of things because they may be wrong, actually. That's what Ezra is saying. And we have to wait for Moshe Rabbeinu. We have to wait until ultimately, which Moshe Rabbeinu means when Mashiach comes, and we'll take it. We have to check the story to see how it's written correctly. But if it is right, if it's written correctly, fantastic. There's a point to it. And if it's wrong, if it's written incorrectly, then you just have to, and you have to just erase that dot. So then you can erase it. In other words, it's always there. The options that we have of taking those droshes and understanding them, not for their simple understanding, but for us to understand the power that we have in our ability to the way we see things. In this case, to give an ein hora, the result of the ein hora for Hagar was that she had a miscarriage. How careful we need to be in our lives, the way we perceive things, that we always are able to share the simcha with other people, even if it's sometimes at the detriment of ourselves, because to ensure that we never give our anhora to anybody.